So today is Ask An Arbinaut, episode 2. Episode 1, just to recap, we had Bellman, one of our technical recruiters, and we discussed Web3 recruitment and kind of all things around the ecosystem of working within Web3, how people tend to get started, and things like that. That's on YouTube if you want to check that out. It's a pretty good episode. But today we're going to get a little more technical for the builders out there, and we have Raul Jordan with us from originally from Prysm Labs, and as many of you know, we here at Arbitrum acquired Prysm, and we're working together probably since back in August. So without further ado, let me bring on Raul. Boom.
Hello, Arbinauts. Hey, Eli, how's it going?
Hey, you're nice and clear.
Awesome.
Perfect. Welcome. Nice sweater.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, just always repping the swag.
Yeah. All right. So, what time is it where you are? Just so I can get a gauge for
Yeah,
your
I'm in Eastern, so it's
Eastern.
5:30 over here. It's pretty good.
Okay, perfect. We're around the same time then. Do you already have dinner?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Not
Me
yet. Just
neither.
looking through some code and just excited for this too.
Yeah, great. All right. So why don't you just start by introducing yourself and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, Arbitrum community. My name is Raul. I'm an engineer here at Off-Chain Labs now, and I'm originally an Ethereum core protocol developer. So, as all of you know, Arbitrum. What makes Arbitrum special is that it relies entirely on Ethereum for its security, right? So, all the applications that are available on Arbitrum, they're made possible because of Ethereum and the guarantees that it gives us. So before joining the Arbitrum team, I was maintaining a project called Prysm, and now it's being maintained by Off-Chain Labs. So when you run a node on Ethereum, you need to run some software on your computer, and that actually downloads and validates the blockchain. And there are many different options for this, and currently the most popular that runs Ethereum proof of stake is the Prysm project. So started the Prysm project back in 2018, and today it's what actually runs the validators on Ethereum. So if you're staking ETH, I know a lot of folks might be also participating in ETH staking aside from just DeFi on Arbitrum. A lot of ETH staking actually happens in the software that we wrote. So I'm a Go developer originally, and I've been working on Ethereum and continue working on Ethereum, and making Arbitrum be as aligned with the project as possible.
All right, great. So I guess, the first thing I would ask and most people would ask is what was the first things you guys were doing when you joined Off-Chain Labs? Like what was the first week like and how was that integration?
Sure. So to give some also context to folks, I think L2 and Ethereum L1, so layer two and layer one, they have a lot more in common than people think. We have we have a very, very strongly coupled roadmap together. So Ethereum actually fully embraces the facts that rollups are the future and that scaling happens through layer two. So a lot of things are happening on Ethereum that will make projects like Arbitrum way cheaper to use, better to use, and faster. So a lot of the things that were on our minds for a long time were, how do we break into layer two, and how do we do something with layer two? And joining Arbitrum was the best decision for us because we're longtime users. We believe that the things that are coming to Ethereum are going to just really be extremely bullish for the community and make it so much better for people using this platform. So originally, when we joined, we started working on initiatives that would get us in that direction, right? And we'll cover some of those today as well. But basically, further scalability for Arbitrum, following more, getting some of the new changes that came to Ethereum with proof of stake integrated in Arbitrum, and we're also working on some pretty cool projects internally as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys were pretty involved in that moment of the ETH 2.0 going live and the integration there of the merge, right?
That's right. So yeah, we were one of the teams that were working towards moving Ethereum to proof of stake, which is a pretty long journey, to be frank. But really excited that it went as smoothly as it did. So now Ethereum, is no longer using GPUs. There's no more miners on Ethereum. It's all staking, and it's a system that is, we strongly believe is a lot more secure than the previous system and offers a ton of benefits. So yeah, I was previously working on that before joining Off-Chain Labs.
So when you talk about like security, many people know that Ethereum is the security layer to something like Arbitrum, like the consensus where things are proven to be true happen on Ethereum, and the data is also displayed and stored on Ethereum. So when we talk about that, like, can you get into a bit of how important that security side is and how complex it can really get when building a layer two on top of it?
Absolutely. So, how exactly does like Arbitrum depend on something like Ethereum, right? So, at the basic level, Ethereum is this database that is globally available and permissionless, and it's really censorship resistant, right? So it's really hard for somebody to come in and revert the Ethereum blockchain and be like, hey, if you send some ether to somebody, and enough time has passed, it's going to be really, really difficult, actually, even almost impossible to revert that transaction. So Arbitrum relies on these properties because, Arbitrum commits data from users and applications on Arbitrum to Ethereum, and there's a period of time after which they can no longer be challenged, and they become basically final, and they become the final state of the chain, right? So all the transactions that you've done in Arbitrum, we want to make sure that they are secured, and Ethereum is really the basis for the security. The reason why we rely on Ethereum is if users want to go from L2 to L1, so you want to take out maybe some funds that you have on Arbitrum to layer one, that takes some time. It takes currently a withdrawal period of 7 days. And the reason is because we give that 7 day period to make sure that in that time period, anyone can challenge any mistakes that can happen on layer two. Anyone can challenge fraudulent actors, and once that time passes, basically, everything is final. And everything is final because Ethereum is like this strong censorship-resistant layer that we can trust. We trust it because of the math and the properties behind it, not because there are humans necessarily behind it. I think that's what makes it special.
What is it? Code is law.
People throw that around a lot.
Yeah. Can you actually give maybe an example of how, like, if you can, let's say a fraudulent transaction did happen. Can you explain maybe the process of what that would look like? Or
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, every so often, Arbitrum posts what are called batches of data to Ethereum, right? And these are posted on depending on different conditions. It's depending on when price is optimal and whatnot. There's actually a lot of interesting theory behind this that a lot of my colleagues on the research team at Arbitrum are doing a lot of work and to just make the UX for people on Arbitrum a lot better. So basically we post batches of data of transaction data to Ethereum, and what happens is that basically during a 7 day period, anyone can come and challenge basically basically what are called roll-up blocks, which are groups of batches and transactions, and say, hey, I disagree that the result of this transaction was this. Actually, users start up at a high level, they disagree about a range of blocks. Hey, I disagree about the results that happen here. And the innovation behind Arbitrum was the way that users can go down and disagree about a single step of computation. So they can say, hey, when we were running this single transaction and this single step, we disagree about this particular thing that occurred. And one person will be right because there is only one valid result for computation. And I think that's what makes it really special. So at the end of the day, even if somebody is tricky and is lying and wants to challenge something, they better prove that they are right to Ethereum. And Ethereum is what basically the final arbitrator of transactions that happen on L2.
so so when we say that the transactions kind of get proven on Ethereum, and then the data is also, posted there, what part of it is happening on Arbitrum, and can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're using DeFi on Arbitrum, when you're playing games, it's extremely fast, right? I mean, you have cheap fees. It's fast to use, and confirmations happen really quickly, right? Um, so this all happens on what is layer two. So transactions go to what are known as sequencers, which are software that processes these transactions and guarantees an ordering of transactions, right? Soon after, these sequences are these series of transactions are published to Ethereum. And when they're published to Ethereum, that gives the opportunity for anyone that disagrees with it, to disagrees with perhaps what the sequencer did, or another party, to challenge that and say that, hey, I think you're wrong. And so that's what keeps basically keeps these actors in check. It makes sure that they stand a lot to lose by being wrong here.
And the like the people who are validating those transactions, I assume there's like an incentive to be honest with like what you're validating versus what you're saying is fraudulent, and the reward incentivizing between those as well.
Correct. There is a staking mechanism, and this kind of mechanism of basically proving that there was fraud, are called fraud proofs, right? And a lot of folks might have heard about this, and in crypto Twitter and part of layer two rollups, right? So we can prove that there was fraud, and we can prove it because we can go down to a single step of computation and say that, hey, this exact thing was wrong, and Ethereum can prove that.
Okay, and then so when you're like we understand how when we're doing these transactions and this work on L2, it obviously happens on layer one, but then how does the work on layer one affect what's already built on top of it in layer two?
Sure. Yeah. So of course, our transactions on Arbitrum need to be, EVM equivalent. So they need to be executable. They need to be able to, we need to be able to prove those, prove execution of Ethereum transactions on L1, right? So we want to make sure that we provide the same experience, to developers writing smart contracts on L1 as they do on L2. And that goes just beyond just like nice developer experience and user experience, but it's also very important for the protocol itself. We want to, because Arbitrum depends so much on Ethereum, we need to make sure that that layer two software is also up to date on the latest improvements to layer one. So one big thing that happened, for example, with the Ethereum proof of stake merge was a lot of things changed on Ethereum, right? So previously, for folks that use Ethereum, if you send a transaction, like let's say that you sell some ether on an exchange or do something like that, typically they would make you wait some period of time before you can maybe withdraw your money or move your money to be safe that a transaction has been confirmed, right? I think a lot of exchanges use, I think, like 30 or 50 confirmations. I forget the exact number, but after a certain period of time, you can be certain that your transactions, you can't be certain, but there's a very low probability that they will be reorged away, right? With proof of stake, we actually have a strong guarantee that approximately every 6 minutes, every transaction on Ethereum at that point before that is final. So it cannot be reverted no matter what. So we go from a notion of probabilistic finality to absolute finality. And I think that's really that's a big change that I think Arbitrum also benefits from. So being on top of these things that happen on Ethereum and making sure that the software on L2 is following the changes on L1 is very important.
Okay, and so like when you guys have been working like with the Prysm team since 2018. How early, like how important was it from the layer one side to start working with a layer two like Arbitrum, and like is it kind of like at the very ground floor, or is there like a point where like you kind of merge with the layer two, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think the timing was excellent. So for a long time, Ethereum has been focusing on mostly getting rid of proof of work mining, and the next frontier is basically scaling, right? And like I said, we've adopted, Ethereum has adopted what we call the roll-up centric roadmap. So basically, all in on roll-ups, all in on layer two on Ethereum, and we're fully aligned with that. And some of the big changes coming to Ethereum next, and some of the things that we're working on now are actually things that directly affect Arbitrum. So one thing that folks might have heard about is this thing called EIP 4844. So, at a high level, what this does is it will lower transaction fees for layer two users significantly more than they are today. Um, and basically provide a lot more data capacity for rollups on Ethereum. This will manifest as basically cheaper fees for everyone using Arbitrum. And that's one thing that is really top of mind. It's one of the main things that we're working on, and yeah, we're bringing it to Ethereum and also to Arbitrum.
Okay, sweet. And then I've heard like during the merge itself, there was, a lot of breath, like people holding their breath around like the block, executing and everything kind of syncing up at once. Can you kind of paint that picture of like what that excitement, I guess, felt like, or nervousness?
Sure. So when we switched Ethereum away from proof of work mining into proof of stake, it was a really big day. Not only because it's just it's been really anticipated, but it's also very risky, right? So we're basically changing the engine of Ethereum, mid-flight, right? And Ethereum is this global software that is unstoppable. So we can't just stop it and be like, hey, we're going to do some maintenance and bring it back up in a few hours. No, it needs to be flawless, right? Like people are relying on this for money, for transactions worldwide. We want to make sure that it's completely seamless to users. So this is why it took so long to ship, because basically upgrading a distributed system like that at scale in the way that we did it, I think was needed to be done in a very circumspect way. We were extremely careful, and yeah, it felt like a rocket launch, right? When basically, okay, like 1 second you have mining, and then 1 second you don't have mining anymore, and everyone's miners are useless. But we have a new system that has far better properties on many at many facets.
What was cool is on search engines, they even had countdowns for the merge on them in certain countries.
Yeah, that's right. It was I think a important achievement also for environmental science as well, and basically for the health of our environment. There were estimates, that I think it was a significant, a pretty big chunk of worldwide energy consumption went towards that was used by mining, was used by GPU miners and Ethereum.
Actually, a couple of my friends who work in like natural energy engineering who aren't like really blockchain in the blockchain world, they sent me graphs of stuff that their coworkers were showing of the data of electricity usage in certain countries and how much it went down.
Exactly. I think it's exciting because people that use Arbitrum as well can know that the technology that we use is green technology now, right? I mean, I think a lot of folks were actually put off by the industry, or one of the main criticisms is, oh, you're hurting the environment. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And now the technology that's backing Arbitrum as well is Ethereum, which is fully green technology.
Yeah, it's very good for when it comes to trying to, I guess, sell the future of Web3 to people who use that argument a lot, and you know that argument is slowly dissipating.
Yep.
Great. So I'm curious, how did I guess the team you're on right now, within Prism in Arbitrum is around like a dozen people still?
Yeah, that's right. So now the Prysm project that currently runs a lot of the Ethereum blockchain is an Arbitrum product. So we're in Arbitrum. We're not only building the software, the L2 software, but also maintaining the Ethereum L1 software, which is really awesome. But we get both sides of two different roadmaps, but also moving together towards the same future. Yeah, we're around 11 people that are working on the Prysm project within Arbitrum, and on top of that, we're also building some pretty cool things for L2 as well.
I'm curious, how did you guys all meet? Was it just kind of Discord, Twitter, or were there events? And it must have been like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is it's a fairly interesting story. I think for a lot of listeners that might want to get involved in contributing to Ethereum, and like might kind of be really big fans of the space, and how can they make an impact. I think what's really cool is a lot of folks just meet online, right? I met actually a lot of my team through Reddit back in 2018. People were talking that, hey, we need to scale Ethereum, we need to do something, and nobody. I started asking questions like, hey, who wants to work on this stuff? And I met a few engineers that volunteered their time and energy to work with me on Ethereum. I think what's really cool is you can come as a complete outsider to the community, and if you put in time and dedication, like you can eventually be managing a lot of the Ethereum project and a lot of the things that are coming up on the roadmap. So yeah, we met in a fully decentralized manner.
Yeah, that's kind of beautiful. Poetry. Um, I think we have a little question here. Don't know if we actually know the answer to this, but can you say a percentage of how much it went down in some countries? I think that was referring to the electricity usage.
Sure. I think it's hard to have a accurate estimate. I think, like, let me pull up a source, right? And don't want to get this wrong. But
Yeah.
they say, oh, actually, there were some sources that say that it will affect worldwide electricity consumption by 0.2%, which is it's fairly significant. The fact that GPU miners take up that much of world energy consumption, right?
Yeah.
And it also reduced Ethereum's energy consumption by over 99.9%, right? Something ridiculous.
Sweet. All right. Thank you. So with, you know, you kind of going over the past of Prism and how you guys came to be and what you guys worked on to get to the merge and everything. What does the future look like now that it's like fully part of Arbitrum?
Yeah, the future for the Prism project and Ethereum in general is just continuing to improve the rollup centric roadmap, right? So this is two different things, right? So one is cheaper fees for L2 users, faster confirmations, and just faster things overall, like greater scalability, throughput, and all kinds of nice things on Ethereum, which directly affect Arbitrum. So that's kind of one of the things that's immediately on the horizon is how do we actually scale data capacity on Ethereum? And this is one thing we're working on, and it will integrating it into Nitro as well, into Arbitrum Nitro, which is really important for us. Um, Beyond that, I think what's exciting is the innovation that is happening on layer two. I think being part of the Arbitrum team gives us a really awesome, really awesome window into these developments, and we've actually started working on some of these, right? So a post published by the co-founder of Arbitrum, Ed Felton, back in December, I believe, around the holidays, is that we're working on a new rollup protocol, a new assertion protocol for Arbitrum. And what this means, it's going to be far better than kind of what we have today. It's going to make Arbitrum a lot more secure, and it's going to make it's going to be just so groundbreaking, I think, for the project to launch something like this. So we've been working on these things in tandem with the Ethereum roadmap.
Can you, if it's possible, the like workload divided between like working on layer one and layer two so that there's this cohesive, scaling of it? Is it kind of 50-50 or is it kind of change depending on, I guess, where everyone's at in the roadmap?
Yeah, I think, like, the main thing. So we have two main things currently, and in the Ethereum roadmap, which is coming up next in around 2 months. We're going to have Ethereum validator withdrawals enabled. So if you're staking ETH, you'll be able to withdraw your ETH that you staked. We're aiming for some time, hopefully before the end of March. We can get that out there. The next thing that's immediately after is what we call EIP 4844, which is reducing fees, reducing data fees for rollups. So that's the next big thing. So that actually is a pretty interactive process where we can do a lot of work on L1 and also L2 at the same time. Like, for example, a lot of the changes needed on Ethereum are also needed inside of Arbitrum. So we work with the team that built the Arbitrum software, and we work with them closely to kind of build this integration out. It's really nice because it's an iterative process. Like, we find ways of maybe offering feedback to Ethereum core developers about how to improve certain things, right? it's
Yeah, you
important.
get that insight of like what's happening above the layer. So
Yeah, exactly.
cool. So where you guys are really, still very much in the Ethereum space, which, you have to be, as you explained, with the way that they're connected. What are some of the exciting things when it comes to like the research and development, since that's what's really driven the progress of layer one and two technology?
Yeah, I think to me, what I'm particularly excited about is really innovation happening around the execution layer. So, a lot of folks talk about scaling initiatives like L2s, and like things like increasing data throughput, which will reduce fees on Arbitrum. It's obviously very exciting, but I think we I really enjoy it when we are at when we're at a place in R&D where we have big stepwise improvements, right? So like one of them was obviously the development of proof of stake, right? We had proof of work, which was pretty simple, elegant, and it worked, but had a lot of downsides. And there was this new generation technology called proof of stake, right? So it's basically like a stepwise change. And then when with scaling Ethereum, we had ideas for like state channels and other things, and rollups came around, and especially Arbitrum, and we have another stepwise change, right? So we have these major paradigm shifts in what in how we can do things, and I think there hasn't been enough innovation yet at the execution layer. So like and actually like how, in like VMs and how transactions are executed and improving that, parallelization, sharding, for example, all these things that are just super cool and can make a big impact. And I think we're on the cusp of that.
When you say cusp in Ethereum terms, that could mean how long?
Well, I think well, it depends. I think what's interesting is that the Ethereum roadmap is kind of split into many different layers. But I think really the hardest part
Is
was
that pun intended?
yeah, like the hardest part was shipping away from proof of work. Proof of work. I think beyond that there are some really interesting things on the horizon, but I don't think anything will take as long as that did, simply because it was so risky and just so critical to change the consensus of the blockchain. It took ages for everyone to agree on how to do it safely, right? Whereas now I think we can move at a little bit faster pace.
Yeah, I have a hard time visualizing just all the different parts of such a huge, like, decentralized network kind of agreeing on things and just implementing it. That must be such a complex procedure.
Speaking of that, I think something that for folks that might not be as familiar with how Ethereum governance works is a lot of folks seem to think that there's somebody that has absolute power in deciding things in Ethereum. Like Vitalik has like a master node in his bedroom or something, right? Like that's not true at all, right? And people do say that the core developers have a lot of power in Ethereum, and I do think that that is true to a certain extent. But what makes this special is that the community also has a lot of power. So, for example, if say if we want to push a change to Ethereum that is really bad for the community, people vote using the software that they run and what they choose to do and how they stake on the blockchain. So a big chunk of the community could say, "Hey, no, we disagree with you guys," and they can run their own software that disagrees with our change. I think that makes it really special. There's like a checks and balances between the developers and the community, and in the community, you guys that run Ethereum have also have the ultimate power at the end of the day.
Do you find there's like a big difference between what the building atmosphere is like between different market cycles? Like, when you think of how much um, transactions are happening on chain daily and like every minute in a bull market versus a bear market, let's say, does it affect the way that you guys develop or any of that?
Yeah, I think it would be remiss for me to say that it has never done that. I think that in particular, when we were in the very depths of the last bear market, I think things were very difficult for a lot of builders, especially some on the core protocol. I think namely because I think morale goes at an all-time low. You have to remain focused because you have these long roadmaps and you need to ship things. I remember there were even long discussions about whether or not like proof of stake would work if the price keeps dropping or something like that, right? And those kinds of things, just add negativity to to the day to day. But we emerged from that and we emerged strong. I think nowadays we've seen that before, and we're just really focused on building and shipping. We have a clear path forward for what this should look like, and we know we can do it. So I'd say it hasn't been as much of a drain on morale as it has in the past few years.
Yeah, and I feel like it kind of the burden kind of gets put on the people who have been through many cycles of the blockchain in the markets to help the new builders coming on to have a mature perspective of how these things play out and just how to keep your focus and keep innovating, because that's when you focus on that, things always come back around.
And people always point out about the projects that emerged at every bear market, right? I think on Ethereum, when I first joined, we didn't even have like decentralized exchanges or AMMs or anything like that. And it was incredible that even stable coins on Ethereum were not a thing, I think, when I joined. And they emerged actually in the depths of the bear market. I think that's when MakerDAO kind of had its inception, as well as Uniswap as well. So you see these really creative and impactful projects emerge during these times, and you can really gauge the quality of what is being built. I
And
think, yeah, go ahead.
with MakerDAO, that was like the DAI stable coin, like the
Correct.
okay.
So, and I see a similar trend with like the quality of projects being built on Arbitrum, like today, like the games being announced, like how nice they look, right? The features they offer, like the communities that are there, it's very strong. So we'll see some things that emerge and stay for the years to come.
So speaking of games on Arbitrum, how do like games on Web3 or NFTs or anything? Do those things need to be considered when you guys are like, I don't know, upgrading smart contracts and moving forward with like the scaling solutions? Like, do you have to look at all genres of tools, or is there like a blanket?
No, that's a great question. And there are varying degrees of changes that we can make to the blockchain and to developers that I think can be really damaging or not. So one thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to issue a change to Ethereum that breaks existing contracts or something, right? I think that's really important. That's happened in the past, and it's honestly inevitable in some regards. But you have to be really careful to avoid doing that, right? I think like an example of this was there used to be, I think there still is, a project called Aragon on Ethereum that offered governance tools, and they were kind of one of the OG governance projects on Ethereum. And I think that some their project was broken quite a few times by certain Ethereum upgrades. It's hard for us to be aware of every single thing that breaks and make that promise that it will never happen. But for the most part, I think developers are very careful about changes that are made and make sure that they're done in the careful way.
I guess with that in mind, and the fact that it's such like a decentralized process to like implement all these changes. How does like if a project like Aragon, for example, if stuff starts breaking while you guys are making changes, by you guys I mean the Ethereum
Hmm.
developer community at a whole, how do they kind of communicate, and how does that all kind
Yeah.
of get funneled in?
Yeah, you have to weigh the pros and cons and understand the voices that are involved, right? So, like for example, if there's and changes to Ethereum don't just happen overnight, and they don't happen like in a way that goes under the radar, right? So, the way that we upgrade Ethereum happens through these network upgrades called hard forks, and these are planned, way in advance. There's a lot of discussion about what's going to go into them. People have more than enough time to gauge feedback and decisions, and these for the most part they're not contentious, right? So it's not like we're going to be changing something super controversial, right? There's been some instances where that has happened regarding, like, say, monetary policy, and Ethereum has been criticized for that in the past. um, for the most part, these changes take a long time to materialize. There's a lot of time for people to voice their opinion. And if and it depends, right? Like, say if a team says that, hey, this will break my contracts, but that change is really critical for Ethereum to progress, and basically and community consensus agrees that it's really important, then I think that's when some contracts have broken.
Otherwise, the developers have enough time to prepare their contracts to adjust to the changes being made at large.
Yeah, I think many times developers have the time to prepare, right? Of course, a lot of many contracts on Ethereum are immutable, right? So you can't really change them once they're deployed. Folks get around this by having like a proxy contract pattern where they can kind of have upgradable contracts behind some proxy, as I'm sure many developers are aware. So yeah, it's mostly really old stuff that breaks sometimes, uh, but I'd say it is very rare.
Okay, cool. I'm actually curious. I meant to ask you at the beginning of the episode, but how did you, I guess, get into Web3 and crypto and that space? Like, where did it begin for you?
Yeah, so before the space, I was I had a Web2 startup a long time ago, and we were, it wasn't going too well actually, and during the time I met quite a few folks in the startup community that were building companies on this platform called Ethereum. This was back in
What's
early
that?
this was back in early 2016, right? We didn't have wallets. We didn't have anything. Like, to sync a node, you had to download this thing called Miss Browser, where it would like download this thing that would sync the blockchain on your computer. It was like super janky. Um, and these people were building like companies on this thing, right? Like, there were like maybe two like smart contracts deployed on Ethereum or something. It was like, yeah. So I thought that, one, they were crazy, and two, that this is really cool. So I stayed in touch with them, and I really fell in love with the project. One of the first use cases where I actually really benefited from Ethereum was, I used to be really involved in the machine learning space. So I used to run a lot of like data science competitions, and there was this platform called Numerai, where basically they run weekly competitions where they give you like encrypted stock market data, and you're supposed to like predict using a machine learning model, what the best performing stuff will be. And if you win the weekly contest, you get paid in ether, right? So I was getting paid in ether for like winning these competitions, and I thought it was really crazy. You know and and I held quite a bit of it, and I think what was crazy was, I saw the ups and downs, and I saw implosions in the community. So during that time, there was a massive exploit on Ethereum called the DAO hack, where I think like a huge amount of the market cap was drained from a DAO, and I think the price dropped from like $30 to like $2, and everyone was panicking, and it was just this chaos, right? So it's really crazy to see how it's evolved.
I
Yeah.
read a lot about that, but I wasn't around for that, so I didn't get to feel feel the drama.
But it was awesome. I think you can really feel the energy of people building on the platform, that they care about the future that it enables. I think it's groundbreaking for me that you can just, people around the world can use this thing, right, without like a username or a password. Like, their private key is really their identity. Um, and it's been awesome to see it evolve. I think I've gotten many things wrong about Ethereum over the years. Like,
Just like speculate, like in your mind,
yeah,
or
in my mind, like, one prediction, I thought that, wallets like MetaMask, the UX just really sucked, and that was going to hold back adoption, and that nobody's going to use this thing because the UX sucked. I was wrong. The explosion of DeFi and NFTs, and people figured it out, and basically bought into the future that this provides, and it's been awesome.
yeah, I would definitely say that UIs still have a long way to go
Yes.
for all I guess adoption tools in crypto. I'm curious if you or anyone in your community have touched any of those kind of um, I guess like building areas. Like, have you guys had to work with wallets or dexes or given feedback based on like what would help adopt things. And
Yeah, I think a lot of the Ethereum core developers actually are they're just so busy and so tied into like the actual internals of the blockchain that a lot of folks say might not have as much time to spend on like say like DeFi or wallets or. But me personally, I'm very passionate about that topic. I think there must be better wallets. One thing I'm particularly excited about is this proposal called account abstraction that will just make it, offer a lot more flexibility in what kinds of wallets can be built. So like one example is like, you can pay gas in like you can pay gas for Ethereum in like an ERC20 token, for example. Somebody else could pay the gas for you, for example. Like all kinds of interesting things you can do that will make the UX a lot better. So I stay pretty updated on that kind of stuff, but I haven't necessarily built a product if that interacts with end users like a DApp or a smart contract.
yeah, count abstraction is a really interesting one. I've also heard a bit about it, and I feel like that makes a lot of sense for things to go in that direction eventually, because um, I just think of how many people I've manually onboarded into this space over the last few years, and one of the like first little hiccups are, oh wait, they made a wallet but don't have any Ethereum or whatever to do any transactions, and then I have to help out intervene, and it's just kind of interesting. And that's a lot harder to do, um, during high gas times, which I guess will get easier and easier. And I feel like that's a big part of why layer twos like Arbitrum will be
Yeah.
a huge part of the adoption down the road, because there'll be a lot less barriers of that first hiccup, like, oh my god, I need $10 just to start using this. It's like, oh, you might just need like in the cents or whatever.
Yep. Oh, I think you might be. Are you muted?
Oh, I double clicked it. One of the interesting things for me is when you're using different wallets, and I've tried many of them, and I think it's good to test everything out, is how they adopt new stuff, like when NFTs started to get really big, how the wallets onboarded that, and how so many of them did it differently, and it's um it's an interesting space to watch grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's very exciting.
um when I guess when was the first, when it comes to NFTs, because that's and at least on Arbitrum in the Ethereum community, that's a big topic of conversation for communities, is when did you guys in the building community start noticing the NFT contracts start to like really you know get developed a lot, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I think NFTs have such a rich history, especially early on, right? I mean, they were being used as a primitive for other things. My first interaction with NFTs was actually with a project called Dharma, and for those that might not be familiar, back in the day, that was like a lending protocol on Ethereum, right? So it was one of the OG lending protocols, or, collateralized lending. And your collateralized debt position is represented as an NFT, right? So, like, of course, it's a non-fungible asset, but you can trade it with folks. It represents your unique debt obligation, and there was a secondary market for kind of selling these debt obligations, which were NFTs, right? So that was my first experience with the ERC 721 standard. I thought it was really really fascinating. And I think at the time, I think that's when probably like CryptoPunks were getting started, and some of that was launching, but it really didn't have as much attention, right? So but I think the core primitive has so much potential beyond just art and media. Like it can be used to represent just really anything that is non-fungible that you can trade, right? It can be debt, right? It doesn't have to be like a JPEG, which is really cool. But I did see the boom of it happen, especially during DeFi summer and after that, and stay on top of that. And it's been awesome to see the original projects that launch on Arbitrum. Like, I love my small brain. Like, it's awesome. The community is awesome. So
Yeah, it is really cool to see how those communities have lasted and just grown a lot. I don't think I think Me personally, it's an opinion, but I feel like we've moved past the point for a lot of these things where it's like a fad or something. But I do always look at everything with a lens of it's all an experiment still, but a very fruitful one at thus far, and a very successful one.
Exactly. Like generative art on chain is fascinating and it's awesome. And like you actually like own, like when you have an NFT of generative art, like a lot of them they tend to even put some of the pixels or generated code on chain, and that's really cool. Like you own that piece, and some of them can be really creative, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I remember when certain like musicians, like bigger mainstream ones, started putting albums minting as NFTs, and that was when I first started noticing it. Um, I was like, "Huh, how do I listen to it?" I was like, I wasn't sure how that worked. When it comes to, I guess, smart contract upgrades, we talk a lot about that. Do does that just like loop in the different type of NFT contracts when you're doing those kind of things, or
Yeah, so smart contract upgrades, right? So when we work on that in actual core development, what we're working on is like the underlying engine that powers Ethereum, and you have to watch out for that, how that's going to affect contracts. I don't think there have been that many really breaking changes to like NFT contracts because of a change in Ethereum core development. To put it differently, it's to give an analogy. It's like if you're a game developer, like writing games for Windows, and we're, for example, the people working on the Windows like operating system, right? Like, yeah, we there might be a change that could affect your game, but I think for the most part we're very careful, and those things don't have as much of an overlap. Um, so a lot of the changes that we're working on are important security upgrades, important scalability upgrades, things that make the project more sustainable, right? So like one of them is, how do I make Ethereum, like for example, state growth more manageable? And that's an open problem that is still being worked on. But how do we do it in a way that doesn't affect smart contracts, right? So I'll give you an example. So let's say that Ethereum is growing at a very fast rate, like the actual like the state is really big, right?
right?
So one thing we can do is we can just implement rent. So we can say, hey, if you want to store something on Ethereum, you got to pay rent. If not, it's going to expire, right? Like developers hate that kind of stuff, right? Like you don't want to you don't want to put developers under that pressure. So that's one constraint that we have. We can't just make decisions that seem easy, but will just be really brutal for devs.
Okay. Excuse me. I was gonna say, when it comes to like the security side of things, are the developers, do they just work autonomously on that, or are there like, what would you call like a specialist in that who like is on the team of the developers? I assume there's parts of the team that focus on that. Otherwise, things might get missed.
Yeah, there are many parts of Ethereum, and I think people have many different layers of expertise. Overall, I think some of the things that we work on are related to peer-to-peer networking, right? So like Ethereum is a bunch of computers that are talking to each other over the internet, and that's a really big thing of a big set of skills that some developers have. Others are around like like virtual machines and execution, like the EVM, right? Like you need developers that are really good at understanding the EVM, because at the end of the day, that's what smart contracts run on. Even on Arbitrum, they run on the EVM, right? Because we're equivalent with Ethereum. So you need a lot of knowledge about systems programming, like peer-to-peer networking, databases, right? Like data on Ethereum is stored in a database, and how do you manage that, to that data to be small, like to not grow too fast, to make it easy to access. Syncing a node, like you want to make sure that when you run the software, it doesn't take 3 weeks to like sync to the chain head, right? And it's been getting a lot better, which is really impressive. So those are the kinds of expertise that I think certain individuals have, and what's really cool is that in Ethereum, all these people come together and they produce this really awesome work together.
Is it easy for like when you list all those things that an Ethereum like developer needs to kind of consider while building? Is it easy for someone in Web 2 development to kind of integrate into this space, and how would you like recommend someone go about that?
Yeah, it's multi-layered, so it's very easy to get lost and feel like, wow, this is way too much information to grapple with. I think there is a lot of jargon thrown around and technical words and acronyms, and I'm not a big fan of those. But I do think that a lot of the knowledge is very transferable, actually. Like I think it's even for a backend developer. I think it's even easier for them to transition to work on Ethereum core development than it is to probably develop smart contracts, because smart contracts are such a different paradigm, right? You have to think in such a different way. You have to be so careful in how you build stuff. You have to understand Web3 primitives. But a lot of the stuff that we work on the back end is stuff that many developers are used to: databases, network.
Stuff the smart contracts operate on top of, you being basically, when you say
Yeah,
backend.
yeah, the stuff that is smart contracts. Yeah, like the actual node software that runs the blockchain and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So I'd say, if you're joining and interested in learning about this, I would say run a node. Like actually run the software at home. Like, hey, I want to sync. You can even sync a Nitro node for Arbitrum, right? And run Arbitrum at home, right? You can run an Ethereum node at home. I run both. And start asking questions, like start looking at the instructions, being like, why does this work this way? Why is it taking so long to sync? Why did it crash? And you have many resources and communities that you can ask questions to.
Is
So
there like easy places to find guides on like how to set up nodes and stuff that are in place, or?
yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend Ethereum.org, just because that's like really well maintained as a resource. So it's like the quote unquote official Ethereum website, right? I think Ethereum is technically supported by the Ethereum Foundation, but they've done a really great job at being less influential and critical over the years in its functionality. And I think that stands to reason. I think a lot of the listeners or folks here might not even have thought about the Ethereum Foundation in a long time, right? And they've done a really great job at kind of being in the background and making sure that the community is what guides the project. So yeah, Ethereum.org is still a good resource though for information. Probably one of the best.
Yeah, I've always loved the just the art design on Ethereum.org.
Yeah.
The color palette always like made it a very calming place to learn about things that are very complex and frustrating.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When you were talking about difficult acronyms and stuff, so EVM is one that I'm sure a lot of users come across, no matter what they're doing in crypto, if they're involved, for more than a minute. Can you kind of explain, I guess, in layman's terms or in an easier way, what EVM is, and how that works and is relevant to users?
Sure. So, just drawing analogs again to computers, and, let's say you're building a game, right? Like maybe we can write a game in different programming languages, like in JavaScript and Python or other common languages that folks are used to. And these languages are meant to be easy for us to write as humans, right? So we write a game in Python or in Solidity or in JavaScript, right? And then your computer needs to be able to run that code and be able to produce some output, right? So a computer can't understand Python or Solidity or JavaScript. Instead, a computer needs to understand a much lower level language that it can process with its CPU and its processor and do all these fancy things. So there's a process that turns your code into a low level code that the computer can then execute. And this low level code is called assembly, or basically machine code, which is what people call. So Ethereum itself, basically, you can program games or NFTs or applications in Solidity, and Ethereum cannot really understand that. Ethereum can only understand some low-level code called Ethereum, basically, Ethereum Virtual Machine Assembly. So then there's tools that the Solidity tool set can turn that into code that Ethereum can understand. And Ethereum runs this software basically on its own computer. So Ethereum basically has this thing called a virtual machine that runs this code and produces outputs. And every node around the world is running this, has the ability to process this assembly code.
And that's the simplest way to explain it.
Yeah, it's just like your computer, and you write programs. Your computer needs to be able to translate that into something it can understand. Same thing with Ethereum. You're right. Smart contract and solidity. Ethereum doesn't understand that. It needs to be turned into something more low level, and then it gets executed.
So by that logic, did virtual machines, that kind of stuff existed before blockchain and everything? Like that was just for computers anyway?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the way a computer works. Basically, we've had that, many decades of computational theory behind behind this technology. I think that's what's really cool, right? Like somebody thought of, like when Vitalik devised Ethereum, he said, "Hey, this Bitcoin thing is really cool. Like we can actually two strangers on the internet can transact and send monetary value between each other without trusting each other. What if we go beyond just money? Why don't we just make it so that two strangers can execute code on the internet with each other without needing to trust each other?" And
And
then
then more than two, then
more than
whole
two,
game.
and
Yeah.
you can run code. You can run code on the internet in a way that you don't need to trust anyone. It's really cool.
Do you see like the future of this space and the whole idea of it being, the next generation of the internet? Do you see it ever getting to a point where people aren't prefacing like the term Web3 when they say something, or they don't even like, maybe there's a way that they aren't even prompted to like make a transaction on their wallet? Is that like something that you and developers talk about or kind of envision?
Yeah, that is my dream. Like, people shouldn't need to know what these things really are to derive value. But I think my perspective has become more nuanced on this. I do think that people always say, "Oh, you should abstract the blockchain as much as possible," right? Like it shouldn't be visible to users, to end users, and all these things, right? But to be frank, like when people started using the internet and like the things that we use today on the internet, they're so different than what existed before that it's really unfair to try to draw perfect analogies. Like people will adapt and learn and use things that bring value to their life. And I think even if blockchain or Web3 is such a different UX or different experience than what we're used to today, if it brings value to people, people will figure it out and they will learn how to use it. So I'd say, like, I'm not as obsessed with like, oh, we should make the UX as exactly as Web 2 or whatever, right? And we say the word the internet, we say the internet, as people say Web 3 today, and it's not a big deal. I think we just need to focus on building things that provide value to people, and everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, like less worried about terminology and what that's meant to look like. You just keep building it up, and then before you know it, everyone's just using it, or you know has to use it in a way to experience the internet to its fullest potential, or online space.
Exactly. It's like when I thought that nobody would use MetaMask because the UX sucked, but everyone used it because they found value from it somehow. So
Yeah, I think one of the thoughts I have around gaming in this space is once once people stop saying Web3 gaming, maybe, or like or if that's even possible, if there's a way that gaming just becomes so seamless between the two, off chain on chain experiences that you wouldn't know the difference.
it should be fun. It should be awesome. I should be able to tell my friend, hey, there's this new game that came out. You should try it out, and then like they try it out, and
Yeah, they should be able to try it out without you maybe having to be like, okay, but first download this wallet, and then if
yeah,
that's possible, I don't know, but I'd be very curious to see how I guess not just the back end developers kind of help that space grow, but even the like let's say the gaming companies themselves, like what they can do in terms of onboarding when they bring in new players. Like if it can be very seamless in the tutorial, it's like you can maybe like turn the wallet into some item in the game, and then that's where my mind goes when I think of the
yeah.
seamless adoption.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even if they have to download a wallet, I think that's okay as long as, like, if it's really fun and exciting and their friends are on it, like people they will download a wallet, like they'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
it needs to be fun. It needs to be like I want to get on. I want to use it.
Well, it's almost like when you need to make like an email, if you didn't have an email for an account, or if you have the email, making like a specific
Right.
user for that game itself. Like when it comes to online stuff, that's pretty common. So I think people need to remember that too.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's exciting to see, possibly like with account abstraction, like, maybe games, they can abstract away gas fees from users, and they can be the ones that take up the gas fees, but they have other business models in that help them be profitable. So users don't have to deal with that part of things, right? I think
Right.
that'll be pretty seamless and very cool.
So when it comes to account abstraction, just because that's, like you said, like a really cool way for this stuff to be seamless, is like, let's say a bunch of games, already exist on the blockchain, which they do. As that technology, the account abstraction technology evolves, do you think it's going to be easy for the existing infrastructure to implement it?
Um, there will be some challenges, but
Yeah.
I think that there are some specific wallets that are being developed that are using account abstraction, and I think those have a really strong chance at like being pretty dominant. So yeah, I think they're in development right now, but we possibly will have like a wallet renaissance coming.
Cool. Is it like a layer three thing that'll be able to implement that? Like, it doesn't need to be done on the ground level to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a possibility. I think that you can there are many different approaches to it, but I think at the end of the day, you're gonna have to have a wallet that has support for like this kind of stuff. Like, oh, you just log in, like you don't need to pay for gas, and maybe the application pays for your gas, or we would need wallet support for this kind of thing. So yeah, I'm pretty confident we'll see it eventually.
Yeah, it's very exciting. All right. Well, just to wrap things up, maybe you want to give the viewers an idea of what they can look forward to in the next year with what you guys are building on Arbitrum and with Arbitrum.
Yes. So three things. One, a lot cheaper fees on Arbitrum, thanks to the innovations happening to Ethereum, and I believe coming later this year. So be on the lookout for that. It will be very noticeable, and we're very bullish about that. Second is, we're going to be just improving the Arbitrum's underlying like rollup protocol, so the actual way the rollup works, and it's going to be it's going to be so much more robust and so much more secure, and that I think that's not as might not be as visible to users, but it increases the confidence in really in the strength and of the Arbitrum project to be resilient. And third, more innovation around the execution layer. I think there's some really exciting stuff coming, that I can't say too much about, but just know that I think it's going to just really, just blow everything out of the water with kind of what's coming. Just really hyped about all the innovation that the Arbitrum team is building, and what users can benefit from.
Oh, that's secret alpha.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I'm getting you a surprise
Yeah.
in a couple months, but like I can't tell you what it is, but I'm letting you know what's happening.
Soon. Soon.
Yeah. All right, that's great. Thanks a lot, Raul. Thanks for taking the time out of your day.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, shout outs to the Arbitrum community. Thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, see you next time.
Yeah, great. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Raul.
Take care.